So then the sine of the arctangent of root 3, so remember arcsine, arccosine, arctangent, they're going to give us angle measures. So this is going to be the sine of some angle where the tangent of that angle is root 3. So I'm thinking about this like root 3 over 1. Arctangent is only in quadrants 1 and 4, and then I'm asking myself, like on my 30, 60, 90 triangle, what angle are you standing at where the opposite to adjacent side is root 3 to 1? Well, you're standing at the 60-degree angle, which is pi over 3. Being this is positive here, then that's got to take us to the first quadrant. So here's our reference angle of pi over 3, which then turns out to be what this angle measure is pi over 3. So the sine of pi over 3 then, so replacing pi over 3 in here, taking the sine of that, sine of pi over 3 is root 3 over 2. So thus that's the sine of the arctangent of root 3. The next one here, so what if I want to do the tangent of the arcsine of negative 1/2? Again, this is giving me an angle measure. So if I take the arcsine of negative 1/2, well, arcsine is only defined in, I can only draw that in quadrants 1 and 4. So thus, well, what angle measure has the sine of it to become a 1/2? Well, the reference angle would be pi over 6. So if the reference angle is pi over 6, and I had to, like, my only options are between negative pi over 2 and positive pi over 2 for this angle when I take the arcsine of something. So thus, this is going to have to be a negative pi over 6. So then the tangent of negative pi over 6 then would have to be root 3 over 3. Or if you want to think about your 30, 60, 90 triangle, you're standing at the 30-degree angle, which is pi over 6. So that's the tangent of that would have to be 1 over root 3, but we're in the, maybe I should draw that out. Okay, let's draw it real quick. So if I'm going negative pi over 6, that leaves us somewhere right in there, negative pi over 6. So then the tangent of that angle, all students take calculus, the tangent is going to have to be a negative ratio in that side, or in that quadrant. So the tangent of pi over 6 then is 1 over root 3, which is root 3 over 3, but since we're in the fourth quadrant, that's going to have to become a negative root 3 over 3. So then I'm going to have you guys try this next one, which looks a lot like the one we just did. If you've done it correctly, then you should have a positive root 2 over 2, and you should figure out that this angle measure eventually is a negative pi over 4. So try that one out, see if that you can get it. And last but not least, approximating with your calculator. So yes, you can do a lot of these on your calculator, but you've just got to be careful with the parentheses. Now, what I don't want is for you to just shove it in on your calculator. If I have any one of these on a homework quiz, I'm expecting to see some pictures drawn out. I'm expecting to see what is the angle that gave you this arctangent, and then what's the sine of that particular angle afterwards. So you can always use a calculator, though, to double check yourself. Just make sure that your calculator is in radian mode. So with this, if you just type this in your calculator, like you can practice typing this in, you just got to be careful with parentheses. So you type in cosine, and then you have to hit second sine to do the arcsine, and then it'll put another set of parentheses, and then you'll type in 0.7459, and then you'll have two sets of parentheses to close it. And if you've done it right, that number should be 0.67. Similarly, just make sure that you have the negative included in this one, and if you type in your calculator correctly, you should have a number of approximately 0.99. So our very last thing here is, when does this equal 2 pi over 3? Versus, is this one 2 pi over 3? Like, when does that sine and arcsine undo each other? When does the sine and arccosine undo each other? Well, they do undo each other, but you've got to think about it in terms of the domain and the range. So is the arcsine of sine of 2 pi over 3 equal to 2 pi over 3? So I'm thinking here about the picture. If I think about the sine of 2 pi over 3, okay, that's going to give me a ratio. So if I draw that, That would be in the second quadrant. Remember, I can draw it in the second quadrant because I'm talking about sine. I can draw it in any of those quadrants. So there's 2 pi over 3. The reference angle there is pi over 3. So if I take then the arc sine of pi over 3 though, well now I got to draw that in only the first or the fourth quadrant. That'll be drawn in the first quadrant. So then the angle measure there is, wait a minute, the ratio. Oops, I'm sorry. Delete that. This should have been a ratio. This point. There we go. Okay, ratio. I even wrote it there to remind myself. So the sine in this quadrant, all students, sine is going to be a positive ratio there. And then the sine of pi over 3 is root 3 over 2. In that quadrant, it's going to be a positive root 3 over 2. So now I'm asking myself, well, what's the reference angle there? Well, the reference angle would be pi over 3, which we have. So then when I'm graphing and I'm doing now the arc sine, it's going to have to be right in here in the first quadrant. Remember that it only goes from negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2, only limiting us into quadrants 1 and 4. So thus, since it's a positive root 3 over 2, that must mean that we're drawing it here in the first quadrant. Thus, this is equal to not 2 pi over 3, but pi over 3. So how do I write this as a sentence? So, no, it is not. That's because the arc sine's range is between pi over 2, negative pi over 2, to pi over 2. And 2 pi over 3 is larger than that. So whenever I'm taking the arc sine of whatever this ratio is, okay, as soon as I take the arc sine of this ratio, the only numbers that it can give out to me in my output, the range, is between pi over 2 and negative pi over 2. So I knew right off the bat that it couldn't be 2 pi over 3, because 2 pi over 3 is larger than the largest it can give out to me, which is at pi over 2. So what about for cosine? For arc cosine, arc cosine has a range between pi over 2 and 0. So the arc cosine's range, that's like apostrophe s, I know it looks confusing. Cosine to the negative 1 apostrophe s there. I don't know how else to write it. So arc cosine's range is between 0 and pi. And so it's able to give me 2 pi over 3. That 2 pi over 3 is in, arc cosine can only be in these two quadrants. 2 pi over 3 is located in one of those two quadrants. It's a number between, an angle between 0 and pi. So thus, it's okay. So since arc cosine's range is between 0 and pi, and 2 pi over 3 is in that, then the answer to that is yes, it is 2 pi over 3. Okay? So that's it for now. This is April Rainey, and I'm signing off.